Benchmark, the voice of business. Presented by LMD.
On this edition of Benchmark, joining us on the program is management consultant Ranel Wijesinha, who tackles a range of issues pertaining to Sri Lanka's economy. Next, Nielsen's managing director Sharang Pant discusses the reasons of the mild uptick in biz confidence in October, with the LMD Nielsen Business Confidence Index registering triple digits. And in our final segment, LMD's columnist Shiran Fernando offers his take on Sri Lanka's macro outlook. That's the lineup for Benchmark.
Hello and welcome to the Big Picture Business Program, Benchmark. I'm Savitri Rodrigo. We're continuing our focus on the economy today, and in our studios is independent management consultant Ranel Wijesinha, and he will be giving us his unique perspectives on the economy and other related subject areas. Ranel, good to have you on the show.
Pleasure to be here, Savitri.
If you, just as a startup to our interview, would you just give me an idea of how Sri Lanka stands in terms of the overall economy?
In terms of the overall economy, let me say I feel very optimistic and very positive. I've been very candid with my comments in the media, as you would have seen, but let me try and explain my rationale or the basis for my optimism. This is something I also said from the audience at the New York Invest in Sri Lanka forum. I would look at it like this: perhaps 5 pillars which form that foundation, which I call the basis. One, we were a nation, even as recently as 3 years ago, where we had burnt bridges. But now I think we have built bridges, we have restored friendships, and I think that is extremely important for a nation to talk about an economy. An economy or capital market or the private sector cannot work in isolation of the nation state. So I think the nation itself, and I'm pleased to see this government has ensured that we restored friendships, regained credibility as a nation. That is one. The second thing is, what value has that got to the economy? I think that Sri Lanka cannot forget the fact that it has, even from President Premadasa's time, had an export-led growth strategy. We are a small market, so we are dependent on our destinations, whether it's the European Union or whether it's the United States. So you build bridges in order not simply to be good in the eyes of people, but in order to leverage the benefit of the relationship when you target those markets. Our directions of exports, I won't go into that now. So the next pillar that I would look at it is the IMF. I mean, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, there was some finalizations of some arrangements. Okay, and the World Bank, the ADB, what I call the multilateral development partners, that's the term we use today, development partner. So we have multilateral and bilateral development partners, whether it is JICA from Japan, USAID from United States, DFID from the United Kingdom, or the World Bank, the ADB, and so on. So all of them are also institutions that consider Sri Lanka as a nation that has got out of rut and regained credibility and respect. The other reason that I am optimistic about, or rather the reason that makes me optimistic, is we have a corporate community and we need to no longer crowd out the private sector. We have to recognize their role, not only pay lip service to the term, the private sector is the engine of growth. You have to incentivize them, and the private sector has clearly demonstrated we are following international financial reporting standards. Our governance programs are good. No matter what anybody says, I think we have evolved. And I think we can be proud of our corporate community. Then you take a look at a number of other factors. Capital market. Savitri, I'm going to be independent and comment on the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Colombo Stock Exchange. There was a time that we were perceived as a pump dump destination, right? Not because I am on the commission, but I believe that we have done a number of things that we can't convey completely to the public. That is not our task. We have to earn credibility, and I think we have restored confidence in the capital market, restored credibility and respect. That will convey to the outside world that this is a destination for foreign portfolio investment.
You know, the other thing is
Come on.
budgets are hot topics these days.
Yeah.
Just generally, when you look at budgets, have budgets actually aligned themselves to the expectations of the economy and of the people?
I think so. Now, the new Inland Revenue Act, which is a starter, as it were, there are lots of things in that new Inland Revenue Act that are good, okay, and that precedes the budget, as it were. So I look at budget, Savitri, and I've said this before, maybe even 20 years ago in interviews just like this, that I look at the budget not as annual static manner. I look at the budget as a dynamic mechanism. And what do I mean by that? Not in a static sense to give a handout, to give an incentive, whether to the less than privileged or to the private sector. A budget, to my mind, is every year incrementally and progressively a mechanism through which you strengthen the foundation of the economy. You enhance revenues, you rationalize expenditure, and you see what you can do on your balance sheet. So my expectation out of this budget is a series of initiatives to get on with rebuilding the nation. Something we got an opportunity in 2009. There are opportunities we've lost. We, Savitri, opened the economy in 77. Deng Xiaoping opened it in 78, 1 year later. India opened it 14 years later. So we are not a new kid on the block with regard to economic strategies and outward-looking growth strategies. We need to get on with things, and I have a lot of expectations of this budget. I have also expectations from the investing community and the people. Let me, at the expense of sounding mischievous, say, I believe that even the opposition, those who govern this nation from 2005 to 2014, they have a responsibility to the people of this country not to pull people onto the streets and object to things. The Buddhist clergy, and I am a Buddhist, I am from the deep south, they must also be responsible. Every religious community must be responsible. Every religious leader must be speaking about a cohesiveness, an alignment of interests, interracial, interreligious, intercommunal harmony. I would like the voices of business, whether they are the chambers of commerce or otherwise, to convey the importance of this. And I will be very candid with you to tell you that just before the elections in 2015 January, I even spoke to a former chairman of the chamber, whose name I will not mention. And I said, you need to, as a past chairman, engage the other chairman because of your charisma. And he completely agreed with me. But to what degree the Ceylon chamber, the apex chamber, I wouldn't call it the apex chamber, the oldest, certainly a very respected chamber, they need to, as a voice of business, voice the need for interracial, interreligious, and intercommunal harmony. I have an expectation of them as well.
You think that is the secret to developing, improving our economy?
See, Savitri, we cannot have economic growth strategies. We cannot have incentives to investors and a nation that has people on the street, brought out onto the street by elements who are disruptive. Neither can we have passive professional business and civil society that waits in the woodwork while people are tearing themselves apart.
Just on another note, we have a yawning trade deficit. It's been widening and widening and widening. Is there sufficient steps being initiated to address this?
I think so. Measures are being taken. For example, I think there has been a lot of discussion about diversifying exports. Nothing new. With this, we said this in 1990. We said it again during election time in 94. This is old hat. What I like to see is initiatives on the part. Now, GSP has been restored, GSP Plus. What are the strategies being deployed by the larger corporates and even the medium and small corporates? What are they expecting of government beyond GSP Plus? You see, you can have all the incentives in the world, but if a a trade bloc does not give us some preferential access, which we have, I think there is a window of opportunity. It has to be used. Yes, there is a trade deficit. If there is a trade deficit, I think it is important to find out where is the opportunity. If we didn't have opportunities, then it's a different story. But I think there are a number of opportunities that are not being used. So the sense of urgency must be there. And it's a combination of the private sector availing itself of opportunity on the one hand, and the governments enabling it. So if there is something that is an irritant or fly in the ointment, whether it's about inconsistency of policy, absence of clarity, then I think the voices of business, professional associations must engage the government and seek to surface those issues and get the irritants out.
Do you think the state-owned enterprises are actually playing the role they can and should play in developing the economy?
Simple answer, the answer is no. And we've heard this term state-owned enterprises for far too long. Reform. I don't like the word reform. In fact, I have shared as early as the first month of the election or after the presidential election in January, I wrote out to the Honorable Prime Minister, the Finance Minister and a few others to say, let us not use the word privatization, not even India's term divestment, but let us use the word that President Premadasa liked, broad-basing ownership. And we can still use it. So, are the state-owned enterprises performing well? Some of them are. Again, not because I'm at the Bank of Ceylon. I challenge anyone, whether in Hyde Park, Sri Lanka, Hyde Park, London or Hyde Park, New York, to say that the Bank of Ceylon is not performing its role. Bank of Ceylon has, even before my time on the board, and I think it will continue to play a significant positive contributory role, and so is the People's Bank, so is the National Savings Bank. So I think there are state-owned enterprises that are performing their roles. Now, is Sri Lankan Airlines performing its role? The answer is no. And I don't think Ajit Das or Suren Ratwatta can say anything otherwise. We who have an affection for this government, affection for the country, right? I think the continuity of some of these policies and strategies is also a function on whether any state-owned enterprise is dragging the incumbent government down, a political party down, and the nation down. And if there is one entity that is doing it, I would like to see a much better focus on turnaround strategies at Sri Lankan Airlines. So, SO is there are some that cannot be put on the block. There are some that can be, and that's not privatization, that's not divestment. It is about broad-basing ownership, and I'm sure it's a win-win. Capital market would have a much more meat, and there is liquidity. Investors would have more opportunities. Pension funds, provident funds will have opportunities. So it's a win-win for all. And the employees, remember, if you have proprietary interest in the institution you work with, clearly you're not going to do very much harm to it.
Well, that's a good spot to take a break, Ranil.
Sure.
We'll be back soon. So coming up after the break, Ranel Wijesinha evaluates Sri Lanka's FDI prospects and also tells us a little bit more about the direction of the Sri Lankan rupee. Stay with us.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
LMD is making waves, airwaves. The next big thing from Sri Lanka's pioneering business journal, LMD Podcast, now online. Listen to our articles on the go at www.lmd.lk. Select, play, listen. It's that simple.
We understand that savings provide for life's special moments. That's why we were the first bank to introduce an incentivized savings scheme, Pathum Vimana. We changed how a nation felt about savings because we believe in banking beyond transactions. HNB, your partner in progress.
Thank you for staying with Benchmark. We are continuing our discussion with independent management consultant Ranel Wijesinha. Ranel, I'd like to hear you answer this question. What is your outlook for the direction of the Sri Lankan rupee?
Positive again. If on the one hand there are reasons for optimism, like I said, I think just before we took the break I said that I have an expectation given all the good things that I mentioned. There are lots of things that need to be done, of course. Like I said, policy consistency, clarity, but those are things that we've been saying all the time. I would urge both the local investor and the foreign investor to, rather than wait for the ideal scenario, I think there are already a number of positive indicators to attract foreign direct investment, to attract foreign portfolio investment and to attract domestic investment. Against that background, I would like to think that the rupee hopefully won't slide as much as people might expect. Some kind of stability is likely to come, partly because inflows, dollar denominated inflows, as well as I think that over time we might be able to, and it is not short term but perhaps in the medium term, be able to not only diversify exports but increase the exports, and both in terms of export revenue, FDI and foreign portfolio investment, I like to be optimistic.
Looking at FDIs, the Prime Minister said he would like to boost FDIs to $5 billion US dollars. However, we have not been reaching our targets.
Absolutely.
What's holding us back and what are our prospects?
Absolutely. That's a very good question, Savitri, because I think the current government, when they were in opposition, they faulted the previous government, where's your FDI? And if there was one entity that brought in a certain amount, they said, hey, don't even talk about it because it's just one entity. Has the BOI, if you want to boost foreign investment, I think we need to. We have our zones that were created many years ago. So it's not that we are a new kid in the block on this, right? We have to sectoralize what are the areas that we are going to promote. Do we have the wherewithal to invite foreign investment to that area? And that is what we tried to do in the early 90s. I have been to Korea on behalf of President Premadasa and Prime Minister, then Minister of Industry Ranil Wijesinha. We tried to target sources of investment from countries with very specific areas. But that was the time that India opened out. So even now, to answer your question, it's good to say, and I agree with the Prime Minister, yes, you have to boost it to 5 billion. But that number by itself is inadequate. I would like to see the Office of the Prime Minister engaging the Board of Investment today, and I'm happy the Prime Minister, as I think, got Harvard, the Harvard Kennedy School is looking at it, to make it a more dynamic promotional arm, right? But you don't only promote. I can go out and say I would like to promote the destination Sri Lanka as a destination for foreign direct investment. If land is required, there must be a very efficient way in which land that can be allocated is identified and allocated fast. If there are a variety of approvals required from variety of ministries and government departments, the one-stop shop should be a one-stop shop, not a 26-stop one-stop shop, right? So it's good to have a target of 5 billion, but I would like to see a very clear strategy. you make or break the BOI. If it is not performing, see why it is not performing, make it happen.
So Ranil, speaking of strategy, just as a final question, very briefly, looking at our next decade or so, what should be Sri Lanka's overall economic strategy?
Tall question, but I'll endeavor to answer that. I would like to see a strategy which ensures that the private sector, the local private sector, is made strong, resilient, so that they don't have any motivation to go anywhere, but rather invest in their own country. That requires a lot of focus from the government and continuing governments, which means the opposition also must acknowledge and embrace that. I would also like to see a foreign investment component which does not dominate, but in partnership with business community. So there I would like to see more and more public-private partnerships, but not necessarily the government or the public sector on the one hand and a foreign private sector alone. I would like to see a combination or rather components of maybe a tripartite arrangement. In fact, I don't see why Sri Lankan Airlines could not be structured that way, with a strong local component and a strong foreign component. The same is what I would have expected of the Hambantota port. But debt to equity conversions and the sense of urgency with which that had to be done, may have not given us the adequate time. But I would like to see an economic strategy that captures a dynamic private sector, a certain degree of openness, as well as growth with equity, so that we don't have the wealth disparities and the resulting social upheavals.
Thank you very much, Ranil. That's as brief as it could get.
Thank you.
So we've been chatting with Ranel Wijesinha, an independent management consultant, on the economy and all related issues together with that. On the other side, we have Anushan Selvaraja. Please stay with us.
Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC.
LMD is making waves, airwaves. The next big thing from Sri Lanka's pioneering business journal, LMD Podcast, now online. Listen to our articles on the go at www.lmd.lk. Select, play, listen. It's that simple.
Nearly 60% of all businesses in our country are SMEs. Some of our most growth-oriented financial solutions have been customized to serve this sector. That's why we have invested over 500 billion rupees to support the backbone of our economy. Because we believe in banking beyond transactions. HNB, your partner in progress.
Welcome back to Benchmark. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. Now for a closer look at the latest on the LMD Nielsen Business Confidence Index. Joining me is the Managing Director of Nielsen, Sharan Pant. Welcome back to the show, Sharan. Now, the BCI made a minor recovery recently. Now, what were the sensitivities behind this?
So the ups and downs in the Business Confidence Index continue. Last month when we saw the BCI drop to its 64-month low of 99, there's been a marginal improvement this month with the index moving up to 106. But if you look at it, the fundamentals behind the sentiments are still the same. There's no change over there. Therefore, we can't really take this change from 99 to 106 as a positive trend or something to talk about. So I would say it's still more or less in the same range, just few ups and downs that are happening. So what are the reasons behind this? If you look at the inflation, which was stabilizing a couple of months back around 6.5, that has started to move up again. In the month of August, it was around 7.9%. In the month of September, it's moved up to 8.6%. At the same time, the interest rates, the lending rates aren't reducing. They are still around 13.5, 14% in general. So these are the two reasons why the macroeconomic factors are still looking under stress, thereby pulling down the business confidence index. If you talk about the consumers, the index, the consumer confidence index, was in the range of 60 to 58 a few months back. Last month it dropped to 52. This month it has remained at 52. What it means is consumers are now feeling the pinch of the increasing inflation once again. They are trying to save some money by spending less on discretionary items. The FMCG growth numbers from Nielsen have been recently released for Q3, and what we see over there, the drop which was first seen in first quarter of 2017, it continued in the second quarter, and it's continued even further in the third quarter. So at an overall level, the value growth has just been 1%, whereas the volumes have in fact dropped.
So what is the corporate pulse then when it comes to the economy?
Well, the sentiments on the economy are still the same. Just like last month, about 1 in 10 respondents feel that the economy might improve in the next 12 months. That's a pretty low percentage. This number was higher a few months back at around 20%. So in general, they are talking about the economy under stress. Reasons being cited are again similar: the interest rates being higher, the inflation being higher, impacting the ease of doing business. Now, various organizations, whether it's World Bank or IMF, continue to talk about the good work that is being done by the government on consolidating the economy. However, there is a recent downgrade of Sri Lanka as a country in terms of the economic performance. So that's happening. That's also something which the leaders are looking into, and which is pulling down their anticipation of the economy.
How do respondents feel about the business and investment prospects going forward?
Talking about business prospects, so in the short term, just about 13% of the leaders feel their business will improve. This number was almost twice, around 29% couple of months back. When it comes to long term, there is a bigger drop. So in the month of July, we were looking at almost 50% of the leaders saying the business will improve in the next 12 months. But now that number has come down to 15%. If you look at the exports, though the exports have grown around 7% in the first 7 months, it's largely coming from tea and a few other products. The categories which were expected to see a growth, say apparels, have in fact declined, which means the GSP plus benefits have not yet taken place. At the same time, imports have grown faster. So exports grew at 6%, but imports grew at 9%. That is impacting the trade balance, which is in turn impacting the currency and making the ease of doing business even more difficult. Talking about investments, so only about 7% of the business leaders are in fact talking about increasing the investments or the investment climate improving in the next 6 months. This number was higher, around 20% a few months back. And as a result, very few are talking about expanding the workforce. So right now it's wait and watch. They want to see how the policy changes happen with the budget coming up and then make decisions based on that.
Thank you very much for joining us, Sharang.
Pleasure. Thank you.
That was the Managing Director of Nielsen, Sharang Pant. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. Stay tuned.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
LMD is making waves, airwaves. The next big thing from Sri Lanka's pioneering business journal, LMD Podcast, now online. Listen to our articles on the go at www.lmd.lk. Select, play, listen. It's that simple.
Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC.
Gami Pubudua, our microfinance offering, makes it possible for the youth of this country who have a viable business plan but lack the funds to realize their dreams. We are committed to grassroots level entrepreneur development because we believe in banking beyond transactions. HNB, your partner in progress.
Hello and welcome back to Benchmark. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. Now for a closer look at the latest on the economy, joining me is economist and LMD columnist Shiran Fernando. Welcome back to the show, Shiran. Now, how would you describe the current state of our economy?
So right now, I think the expectation is very much fixed towards what the budget entails, and we'll know, I think, in about a week or less than a week what that would mean for the economy, because what we've seen in the last few weeks is somewhat of a relative stability in the economy. You're not seeing major shocks both domestically and externally, and even the domestic shocks, drought and all, is well understood, and even though inflation is sort of rising, there is no reason to panic because it's being led by these weather conditions and things like that. So that side of the economy is sort of pairing up well, and reserves are building up. The rupee went through a bit of appreciation in the last few months, but recently in the last few weeks has seen a bit of depreciation to be expected in with the season coming up as well. So it's overall shaping up better. You're seeing more foreigners coming into the bond market, and that's also helping improve reserves and the rupee as well. But the direction, I think, the economy, the next direction, in particular, given you had a Vision 2025 brought out by the government, as well as the third economic statement articulated by the Prime Minister. What you now need to see is the budget sort of continuing on that same path, and not sort of giving a mixed signal, which would then result in you actually taking a step back. So that continuity, if the budget does entail, then the stability, at least on the domestic front, can be continued. But on the external side, I think still right now we're still enjoying inflows coming in, but there are certain risks that are there as well, in particular with the appointment of a new Federal Reserve Governor, whether it will be a person who that's sort of indicating towards Jerome Powell sort of being the one who will continue to keep things as it were under the current president, under the current chairperson Janet Yellen, or someone from the outside who will sort of radically change or mix the current trajectory of US rates. So those kind of external risks are also on the table, and that's why I think the budget is good, particularly to get the domestic house in order, and that's, I think, where the expectations will now lie towards.
Shiran, what has been the trend in private sector credit growth?
So credit growth has been still not coming off as it has in the past when the central bank has been in a tightening cycle. Yes, there is a significant amount of lag, but this time as well we're continuing to see, even though it's coming down on a year-on-year basis, it's come down to about 18%, still it's growing average maybe 50 billion, 60 billion a month, which is quite high compared to what we've seen in previous rate cycles when interest rates have been for a long time been high. So a bit worrying in that sense, and it's been driven a lot by sectors such as construction, retail trade, financial services, and sectors like that. But I think the central bank will keep one eye on that to see whether it will continue to decline or whether they need to sort of take policy action on it.
How is our economy performing in comparison with the rest of the region?
So in terms of economic growth, particularly in the South Asian region, we're not booming as say an economy like India, but we're stabilizing. Countries like Pakistan are finishing up their IMF program, and they're also politically moving not maybe in the right direction. So the economics are also taking backseat. So Sri Lanka is positioning itself quite differently, I would say. Because you have the debt overhang plus you have sort of to kickstart growth. So I wouldn't say we need to sort of really look at where we need to compete against these countries, but leverage on the fact that portfolio inflows can come more often now, and also to get the export strategy right to sort of capitalize on GSP+.
Thank you very much for joining us, Shiran.
Pleasure to be here.
That was economist and LMD columnist Shiran Fernando. Thank you for watching Benchmark, and we hope to see you again next time.